My next guest recently stepped down as CEO of a New England-born staple, Dunkin Donuts. Before that, Nigel Travis headed up the Papa John's pizza chain and has held leadership positions at Blockbuster, Burger King, all cornerstones of American life through the years, each of which has seen its share of ups and downs. Through it all, Travis has learned a lot about just what it takes to find success in business and beyond. And the key, he says, is questioning authority and the status quo. His new book is The Challenge Culture, why the most successful organizations run on pushback. Nigel, now executive chair of the board for Dunkin Brands, joins me. Nigel, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Delighted to see you, Jim.
What is a challenge culture? What does that mean?
Well, it's effectively, there's two parts of it, because there's two key words there, challenge and culture. Most people focus on the challenge part because it really means challenging the status quo in an organization, but it also means challenging yourself, challenging your colleagues, challenging down, challenging up, and challenging sideways. So there's a lot of challenge in there, but it also means you do that within a really positive culture, which I think is in many ways the most important part of those two words.
Can we talk about the challenging up part? Because you've mostly been on the up part of this thing. To me, it is totally counterintuitive. People in charge, I used to run little nonprofits in my former life. Intellectually, I love the concept. Emotionally, it gives me hives. Most people in high places don't want to be challenged, do they?
I think that's very true. And I think what I've found in certainly Dunkin, Papa John's before that, and I also mentioned my English soccer team that I chair. Yeah. We're using that approach, and we find it works because you get better business solutions. Now, people are vulnerable. Exposing yourself to people from below is, for many people, including me, a difficult concept to embrace. But we're all a little bit vulnerable. But I think opening yourself up allows for you to really improve on everything you do. And
you argue in your book that not opening yourself up, not embracing this kind of culture, is in part what led to the downfall of the Weinsteins and the Aileses and the Matt Lauers and the Me Too tidal wave. Is that not accurate?
I certainly think that's true. I mean, I think people failed. I think people had egos that they didn't want to be pushed and challenged on. People didn't accept anything that anyone said. But I think you need to have the mindset that everything you do, you should ask people very simply, can I improve on this? I mean, right now I'm doing a presentation for a big conference next week. I ask all my people, what do you think of this presentation? Every single one of them came back with, I think you need to change this or change that. Now, I'm not saying that could have stopped some of the dreadful things that happened with some of the companies you talked about. But I think it's a mindset that can help you stop it.
I don't think Steve Jobs bought into this. He was authoritarian.
Yeah.
He basically told people what to do, wasn't an input kind of guy. He did pretty well for himself,
He did extremely well. I'm not saying this is the only way to run a company. I happen to believe this is probably the best way to run a company, and I think you get the best solutions. And a lot of it is based on the fact that when I was at Blockbuster, I truly think we could have challenged ourselves better, and Blockbuster would still be here today.
So, if you'd bought Netflix.
Well, if we'd bought Netflix, and also I think if we'd taken the tests we did on vending more seriously, we may have stopped Redbox running away with the video rental market.
You know, it seems to me, as someone new to your concepts, well, not the concepts, but your elaboration of the concepts, if there's any industry, for lack of a better expression, that is by definition a challenge culture, it's politics. Because theoretically, people in elective office have to respond to challenge. They have to respond to pushback. But there's somebody atop our political system who is, it seems to me, buys none of this and has done pretty well as well. Doesn't like being challenged, doesn't like pushback. A former business guy, a former CEO himself, Donald Trump. How do you explain his non-embrace of this, or am I missing something?
Well, I think you may be missing something. And by the way, I'm educating myself as I go. Bob Woodward's book, I'm actually halfway through it right now, and I read a section earlier this morning which talked about whether they should attack in Syria. He went right round the room asking everyone for the input, and what was also quite impressive, he actually phoned up the commanders in the middle of the Mediterranean to ask them. So that was a perfect illustration of the challenge culture.
But there are other illustrations where he has cabinet meetings where he wants sycophancy around the room saying how brilliant he is and what a great job it is.
Yeah.
The absolute opposite of a challenge culture.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people say he's a business person. He's a business person in a family business. And I think there are differences between that kind of business and, say, the public corporations that I've run, where you have shareholders to answer to, you've got investors who've got the outsider in view. And one of the things I talk about a lot in the book is there is a big disregard for the financial analysts in most public companies. They research the company, they talk to the competition, so they're very informed about your business.
Can we talk about another kind of challenge? The challenge of the customer, I guess I could call it. You were on Fox News not too long ago and talked about undocumented immigrants and how there should be a path to citizenship. There was another company recently that decided they'd put a pretty controversial figure, Colin Kaepernick, as the face of their advertising campaign, Nike. In both those cases, I don't know how conscious your decision was, but you would essentially challenge your customers on a pretty controversial topic, as did Nike. Is that part of the challenge culture, to challenge in every direction, including the people who buy and purchase what you do?
To be honest, it's not a conscious part of the challenge culture. My book is about leading and managing. Challenging the customer, I think, is an interesting concept. I think Nike have actually done it pretty well. I mean, they clearly researched the market. They clearly went out there. Colin Kaepernick, you know, you can debate, but I think it's very strange he hasn't played again since started the protest. When I made my comments about immigration, we always do it in a way where we say there should be a discussion. And one of the common questions I've had in the tour I'm currently doing is, what do you think about CEOs having views about politics? I say CEOs should have views about politics. And one positive thing about this country that's truly positive is I think government is very accessible. I go to Washington a lot. We feel we can influence things here in the state, and other states are very similar. It's a very open form, and we have seen things change as a result of the impact of our discussions with administrators.
You ever put a bag over your head and sneak into Starbucks, or no?
Oh, of course I do.
You do?
Yeah.
You go as yourself, or do you go as somebody else?
I mean, I'm not that famous. I'm not like you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Great
Thank you very
book.
much.
Did I challenge you adequately or not?
By the way, your questions were fantastic.
Excellent.
Open questions
Love
and challenging.
This man. Nigel, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much. Book again is The Challenge Culture, why the most successful organizations run on Pushback. And if you want to hear more from Nigel, you can catch him in person tomorrow afternoon at the Barnes & Noble in Braintree. That is at 1:30 in the afternoon.